You already know it. Blueberry plants love acidic soil. And oftentimes our native soil isn't acidic enough, or even potting soil isn't acidic enough for blueberry plants. Blueberries prefer a soil pH anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5, which is quite acidic considering that most plants thrive on very neutral soil pH. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to set up your blueberry plant for success, but also how to change your soil pH in an existing blueberry plant. Like most people, I knew when I planted my blueberries that they like acidic soil. I didn't do enough research though when I planted my blueberries to change the soil pH drastically, because I tested my soil pH and it said that it was close to neutral. And so I thought, you know, I had an acidic fertilizer mix. I thought that'll be enough. I'll just fertilize with that a couple times a year and that will be enough. Last year I had a baby, this little guy down here that you can't probably see. And I totally neglected a lot of parts of my garden because life was just really busy. And so this year I'm having to catch up on a lot of things. And one of those things is tending to my blueberry plants. This year I noticed that my blueberry plants were just not looking very healthy. The beautiful lush green leaves are yellow this year, which is a sign of nutrient deficiency. When a plant is not in its perfect ideal soil pH type, then it oftentimes can't absorb the nutrients that it needs to thrive. Changing that soil pH will allow the plant to absorb those nutrients. That's what we're doing today, is I am going to be working on acidifying the soil around the current blueberry plants that I have, and then I'm going to be planting a blueberry here next year. And so I'm going to be working on starting now to acidify the soil, this location, so that this plant can just have a really great start and hopefully not suffer like these other ones have. First thing you need to do is test your soil pH. Now there's several ways to do this. I have a video that I'll link right up here that explains how to do it with a home test, a rapid test. This isn't very precise, but it does give you kind of a rough idea of where your soil lies. Now mine was very obviously neutral to slightly alkaline. So I know that no matter what exact soil pH my soil might be, I know I still need to make it more acidic. Now if you want to have something more precise, I would send it to a lab. There are several soil pH testing sites where you send in a sample of your soil and they will give you an exact soil pH. Once you know where your soil pH is, most likely you're going to have to acidify it. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, depends. If you're planting your blueberries in native soil and your native soil has a higher pH, it's going to take a lot more work to bring it down. That's why a lot of people end up actually planting their blueberries in containers or raised beds like mine here, where you can start with a soil mix and change the soil pH before you even plant your blueberry, just so that you're set up for success. Let's talk about some things that don't work when it comes to changing soil pH. Number one, coffee grounds. A lot of people say, oh, coffee grounds are very acidic, they will change your soil pH. And although that is partially true that unbrewed coffee grounds are very acidic, brewed coffee grounds are not very acidic. And the change in the soil pH that they will cause is pretty minimal, if any, and it would take an awful lot. Another one is vinegar. Some people talk about adding vinegar to your soil. And yes, vinegar is very acidic, but it can actually be very toxic to your plants. So it's not a very good solution. In fact, I highly discourage doing that. Another one is pine needles. And this is a common misconception that pine needles are very acidic. Now, pine needles on, fresh green pine needles on the tree, yes, are acidic, but the pine needles that fall on the ground and are dead are actually not very acidic, so they won't change the soil pH that much, and you would have to take pine needles off of a tree. And once again, the change in soil pH probably is fairly minimal if you were to use the fresh green leaves. Will it hurt to add pine needles around your plants? No, it won't hurt, but don't expect that to be a big enough change in pH for your blueberry plants. Now, what about peat moss? This is a really difficult one for me to touch on, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. There is a lot of controversy when it comes to peat moss because it's, in the past we said it's a non-renewable resource. There's been a lot of measures taking place to try to preserve our peat bogs. There are a lot of environmental factors and things that I don't believe that the peat moss industry is a great one to support. Now, will peat moss, sphagnum peat moss, change soil pH? Yes, in the immediate time period, yes, it will. Over the long haul, probably not that much. It will improve drainage if that is a concern of yours. And yes, it will immediately change your soil pH. but it's not probably the best long-term solution. And so it is actually a solution that I'm going to just avoid altogether because I have fine enough drainage, and I have a better solution for long-term for my blueberry plants. If you want to learn more about peat moss and the controversy with it and the implications of using it, and also other solutions to our peat moss, I would highly recommend a video that Epic Gardener put out, peat moss versus coir. I'll link that up here if I can, or I'll link it in the show notes down below. Okay, so now that we spent a while talking about what doesn't work, let's talk about what does work. And my solution after some research is sulfur. And this is by Espoma Organic Soil Acidifier. And what this basically is elemental sulfur. I definitely recommend using elemental sulfur as compared to aluminum sulfur or some of the other compounds of sulfur, because those have other things added to them that are higher in salt and can be a little more damaging to your plants if you apply too much. Elemental sulfur, on the other hand, it's very difficult to overdo, so it's a safer product to use. The thing to check for is when you look at the soil acidifier ingredients, the guaranteed analysis, you want to look for elemental sulfur as the main ingredient. Let's talk about how elemental sulfur actually changes your soil pH, because it's actually not the sulfur that does, it's your bacteria in your soil. Elemental sulfur is broken down by the bacteria in your soil, and the byproduct is sulfuric acid, which is acidic and will change your soil pH. So this actually is a process that will take a long time because it's dependent on the microbiology of your soil. This process will happen a little bit faster in warmer weather because the bacteria is most active in warmer weather. Let's talk about what to do to prepare your soil for your blueberry plants. So if you haven't planted your blueberries yet, or you're going to be buying some in the future, I would start the process of acidifying your soil, especially if your soil tends to be very acidic, the soil that you're going to be using. In this wheelbarrow here, I have the garden mix that we got from a local company. This is what I use in my entire garden. So I know that I need to acidify it. Now the directions on here say to apply for new plants 1¼ cups at the planting time. Because I have some time before I'm going to be planting my blueberries, since I plan to plant it next spring, I'm going to add probably about 2 cups of the acidic mix to this, because this is a lot here. It's going to be filling a large space. And then I'm going to be testing it later this fall, and if it's still not quite there, I'll add a little bit more. And then next spring I'm going to add a little bit more after I test, just to kind of make sure that I'm getting where I want to be. On the bag here it says you can repeat this process every 60-day intervals until you reach your desired pH. So that's my plan, is about every 2 to 3 months I'll test my soil, apply a little bit more if I need to. I'm going to be adding 2 cups, which is 1 pound of the elemental sulfur to my mix here. I'm just going to mix a little bit in right now because my son wants to play in this and I don't want him to touch the amendments. So the microbiology in your soil is very crucial to the success of the breakdown of this sulfur, and so we really want to make sure that we're improving the action of your microbiology and making sure that your soil is very healthy. One of the ways that I am doing that this year, and I've had extremely good success, is by using worm castings. And this is worm castings by Vermistera. I have been testing out their products this summer. I have been very pleased with the results so far. So I'm going to be adding half a bag of this Vermistera worm castings to my soil mix here in an effort to really improve the microbiology of my soil and hopefully have better success with acidifying my soil. One of the standards that I also do is by adding azomite to all of my beds when I'm planting. Azomite provides a lot of those trace minerals that aren't in typical fertilizers. It's completely natural and safe. I'm going to add 1 cup to this mix here. My favorite fertilizer for fertilizing blueberries is the acid mix by Down to Earth. It actually has sulfur in it to help with that acidity. And this is what I was using before on my blueberries, thought that that was enough. Apparently it's not. But I'm going to be fertilizing 3 times a year with this for my current blueberries. They're technically past the time that I would normally fertilize, but I'm going to go ahead and fertilize them anyway because they obviously have a nutrient deficiency. Now, I forgot to mention that one of the crucial steps to improving the soil microbiology is compost. And because my garden mix that I buy from the company, it has 1/3 of it is actually compost, I am not adding extra compost quite yet to the new place that I'm going to be planting my new blueberry plant. But on my current blueberry plants that are already planted, I'm going to be adding a layer of compost on top after I have amended the soil with the sulfur. Now let's talk about established blueberry plants and what you need to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add, according to the directions, I'm going to add 2.5 cups of the elemental sulfur around the base of the plant along the drip line, which is basically the spread of the plant. And then because I know my plants are deficient in nutrients, although I don't normally fertilize around this time, I'm going to go ahead and fertilize right now with a cup of this acid mix. And I'm going to do the same thing, spread it around the base of the plant. I'm also going to add a cup of the worm castings directly around, maybe a cup and a half, around the base of my blueberry plant. Now, you can either do this before adding the compost, or you can mix all this in with the compost and add the compost on top if you want. I just wanted to, I don't know, I feel like really mixing it in well with the blueberries from the start, and then putting a compost on the top would make the most sense for me. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a half a cup of the azomite. I'm going to take this little hand rake and just mix it into the soil there. Now the important thing is to make sure to water this all in when you're all done, to start that process, get those microorganisms active, start breaking down that fertilizer and the sulfur, and you'll start seeing results hopefully within a few months. For me, I'm guessing it's going to take probably a good year before I'll start seeing results. So after I'm done adding the soil amendments, the last thing I'm going to do is add a nice topping of compost. I have a homemade compost I'm going to be adding, as well as a purchased compost. I'm going to be mixing them together. Add those on top, and then my very last step after that is going to be adding a nice layer of wood chip mulch. So I hope that you found this video helpful. It is really confusing oftentimes when it comes to the acidity of blueberries, what exactly to do and what to use. I hope this video took a lot of the questions out of your mind, and hopefully I made it as clear as possible for you to follow along. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you in the next video. Go out and grow something. God bless. Oh, you picked a white strawberry. It's not going to be very sweet. Look how big that was. You want a red one. You want to pick the red ones, bud. Just picked a white strawberry.